Welcome to Identifying and Supporting At-Risk Youth. This is the Education Coordinator for the Child Advocacy Center, Sara Flack, and today I'll be talking about some signs that a young person may be experiencing one type of abuse and what you can do if you are concerned for that person. I want to start by talking about some indicators of possible physical abuse. Some possible red flags include things like unexplained bruises and welts, burns, or fractures. If a young person is frequently displaying a variety of injuries that they can't explain and have no explanation for how they receive them, this may be a large cause for concern, especially if those um, injuries are on multiple surface areas of their body or are inconsistent with their age and development. For example, typically when we have toddlers who are learning to walk or young children who are going through growth spurts and aren't necessarily very coordinated, they may have a lot of bruising on their shins and knees from falling or tripping. When we start noticing not only those bruises and injuries, but we start seeing things on the back sides of the legs, upper back, or forearms, we may start to be even more concerned. Some other things include behavioral change, which is especially extremes like aggressiveness. When a child sees and experiences physical abuse, they're more likely to then display that aggressiveness towards others. They could also have a withdrawn, passive, or emotionless behavior and may even be frightened of their parents or afraid to go home. And they could also report that injuries are received from their parents, especially when their parents are mad or angry with them. Here are some indicators of sexual abuse. Sometimes children will have unexplained injuries to their private areas. This may include sexually transmitted infections, bleeding, a regular discharge, or multiple pregnancies and abortions. A lot of times children will have regressive behaviors. Regressive behaviors are ones that we feel that this child has already outgrown. So for example, they may have sucked their thumb as a young child or had issues with bedwetting, but they've since outgrown that, and now they've regressed and went back to those behaviors. There's many reasons why aggressive behaviors may come up. For some children, they connect being younger with not being abused, so they may want to act younger in order to stop abuse. And for other children, they may be lacking personal hygiene or bedwetting to keep someone away from them. They may also have self-mutilation as a result of this and these feelings. They certainly would have a fear of a specific person or being left alone with that person, and they may also have sudden changes in their attitude or behavior, expressing their age with inappropriate knowledge of sexual relations. This may be statements that they make, um, or it might also be in the imitation and their play. Children may imitate sexual acts, whether that be the sounds or behaviors. Um, they may do this with dolls or toys. They may have drawings that are inappropriate or unusual or bizarre. And they may also dress, act, or talk in an inappropriate or promiscuous way. Some indicators of emotional abuse. Now, emotional abuse is often underreported, and children tend to suffer for a long time with emotional abuse as there are typically no physical signs unless it coincides with another form of abuse. So all of the trauma that the child is experiencing is internal, but they may show some signs like trouble sleeping. This could be trouble falling asleep at night or trouble staying asleep once they are asleep. an inhibition of play or like a stunting where they um, are almost feel like they're walking on eggshells and thus they are timid or afraid to do anything that may be construed as wrong or inappropriate. They may have fighting or aggressive behavior, especially if they're growing up in a home that is experiencing any form of domestic violence as well. Oftentimes, children who are experiencing abuse will also show falling grades or truancy patterns. However, this isn't always the case. In some examples, we've heard from children who, during their time of being abused, also sought, some security in school, and so they were always at school and they excelled because that was their safe place, and they felt like they had to compensate or overcome some deficit in order to show that they were good enough to those that they loved. Some other indicators of emotional abuse may be some poor self esteem or self image, which also can lead to suicidal attempts or self harm behaviors. There may also be some developmental lags. With emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, we're typically talking about something that's being done to a child. However, with neglect and maltreatment, many times this is something that the child is not receiving from the adult caretaker. And when they don't receive everything that they need to be healthy and successful and to flourish, they may experience many of these indicators. Some of those include fatigue. Perhaps the child doesn't have a safe place to rest or doesn't feel cared for and comfortable where they are. They may also be growing up in a neighborhood that could be dangerous, or the job that their parents or caretakers are involved in might have a degree of danger. They may begin stealing or begging for food. If they are not receiving enough nutrition at home, or their family is not able to provide enriching and fulfilling meals for them, they may start looking for food in other places. They could also have a lack of personal care, including poor hygiene, torn or dirty clothes, untreated need for glasses, dental care, or other medical attention would be referred to as medical neglect. When a child is ill, they often would go to a doctor. If they're having trouble with their vision or dental care, they would see a specialist. But in some instances, the caretakers simply refuse to get them the care that they need, or they may actually just be unable. Frequent absences from school or tardiness can fall under educational neglect. If a child is already struggling or behind and caretakers refuse to help get them their IEP or 504 plan, this could also fall into educational neglect. We can also talk about lack of supervision or inadequate guardianship, and those a lot of times occur when a child is inappropriately left unattended or without supervision. Although there's no one set age where a child is old enough to be home alone, you really should use your judgment when making that decision. Children should be mature and responsible enough to care for themselves and have basic skills to provide themselves food and appropriate care in case of an accident, as well as understand how to handle emergencies. If a child is not ready for all these responsibilities, it's best not to leave them home alone, and certainly not to leave them in care of other children or left babysitting their young toddlers and infant siblings. I also want to mention some indicators of human trafficking. Indicators of human trafficking include homeless, runaway, or truant. Being homeless, runaway, or truant also increases the likelihood or chance that a young person may be taken advantage of or brought into the life of human trafficking. When we see a significantly older partner or controlling adult around a young person, especially one who is not related to them and appears to be more so a partner that they could be in a romantic relationship with, that could be a strong indicator as well. A lot of times, these young people have no control over their schedule or money, and they are seen to be reducing contact with their family and friends, as well as things that they normally would be doing, whether that's sports, arts, or music. There could be some indication or reports of domestic violence or interpartner violence. You may also start to see that they have money and objects beyond their means. So one day a student might show up to school with a large wad of cash or a brand new iPhone, something that they normally would not have. And if asked about how they make their money, they typically will avoid that. They could also have fake IDs or hotel keys and lie about their age or what they're for. Additionally, they may have knowledge of geography in urban areas, especially if you don't live in those urban areas. So, my child needs help. What do I do now? Well, it's really important to stay calm and be supportive. You want to ask minimal amounts of questions. When we first respond to a child or a child is disclosing any type of abuse, it's really important to stay calm. If we overreact, that child may be worried that they're causing you harm or upsetting you, and they may withhold some important information. If you underreact or minimize the situation, they're not going to feel like they're believed and they won't trust you any longer to come forward and have you help them through the situation. So you really want to try and stay as neutral as possible and remain calm. By asking minimal questions, we can ensure the child's safety without confusing them or leading them. We want to really give that questioning and leave that for a forensic interview that can be scheduled at the CAC later on, which will include members of law enforcement and child protective services. When a child is freely disclosing any type of abuse, you really just want to listen. Think conversation. Don't interrupt and just let them narrate. Try to use open ended questions like, is there anything else you want to tell me? Or, and then what happened? Keep the child safe. Let them know that you've heard what they had to say, that you're there for them, that you know that what they're going through is not their fault, and that it was probably very difficult for them to tell you. And then make sure you call for help. Typically, I would suggest letting the child know that you're going to call for help so that they don't feel like they're lack or that they placed trust in you and that you went behind their back to do something or call somebody else in. They may feel like they don't want you to tell and they don't want somebody to intervene, especially if this is somebody that they care about and love who's abusing them. They don't want to see that person punished. They really just want the abuse to stop. So I would suggest that if the child is old enough to understand, that you let them know that you're going to be calling help from a friend or someone who talks to kids about things like this all the time. To report child abuse, you should reach out to the 1-800 number for the mandated reporter hotline or OCFS, sorry for the typo, or your local CPS. Local CPS phone numbers can be found with a simple Google search, or you can also contact local law enforcement who will be happy to give you their phone number. Local law enforcement should also be contacted as soon as possible, whether that's by you or by CPS. This way they can coordinate the investigation and interview of a child. Through their coordination, we can take a team approach to interview a child at the CAC. This reduces trauma for the child, as they will only have to tell their story one time, and all the important adults who are involved in the case will be able to hear it and have it on record. For a mental health crisis, you should reach out to the Finger Lakes CPEP program through Clifton Springs Hospital at 315-462-1080. For help with substances, there's the National Helpline as well as FLACRA. I also want to mention there's an app for that. The Ontario County Task Force has an app through the Safe Harbor program. Their slogan is "Stamp It Out" or "Stamp Out Exploitation." This app is available on Android and iOS devices, and once you download it, you'll see that there's a variety of different tools and resources on the app. One tab of the app will list indicators and have an assessment tool for human trafficking. There will be multiple questions that you can respond yes or no, and it'll give you an assessment as to the risk level of this young person or this youth. From there, you can determine what route is best to take. But what I really like about the app is the Resources tab. Under the Resources tab, you'll find a variety of websites and phone numbers for everything you can imagine. As you can see on this image, we have the Ontario County Hotline as well as the National Human Trafficking Hotline. But this tab really gives you everything broken down. So whether that's mental health services, social services, rehabilitation, or substance abuse services, they'll be broken down into categories with a list of local and national tools and resources. And if it has a website, they'll be directly linked. So just by clicking on the website listed on the app, it'll take you into a new page with all of that website. Seneca County Safe Harbors program also has their slogan, "Unlock Your Voice." While they don't have an app quite yet, they do have an email, and their email, unlockyourvoice@co.seneca.ny.us, can be very helpful, and you can submit any questions so that you can get more support or information, or also schedule a training related to human trafficking. They have many handouts and devices that could be super helpful for you and your program. I want to thank you for attending and listening to my webinar today. If you have any other questions or would like to schedule a full training with me, my email is sarah@cacfingerlakes.org.